Hi, I'm Scott Cosenza in for Sarah Cowgill, along with John Clark, Dave Patterson, and Graham Noble. And this is the Conservative 5 for today, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. On today's episode, it's all about American independence. We will discuss the reverence and celebrations in Independence Day. And the Supreme Court has ended its term, and there's a lot to unload in Supreme Court. That's a wrap. And where did NYC's shiny new object come from? We will let you know in Zohran Mamdani. Who is this guy? Finally, it's another quick fix to flex the brain in Just for Fun, Volume 74. All this and more on this edition of the Conservative 5.
No one got that.
Independence Day is upon us, number 249. The Declaration of Independence was passed by the Continental Congress July 4th, 1776, when our forebears decided to go to war against King George III to carve out a new nation. A brave and treasonous act that would end in death if not successful. We used to celebrate with parades, oratory, and toasts, but now the day tends to signify fireworks, picnics, and family gatherings, rather than celebrations of the founders' vision of liberty. I worry. Have Americans forgotten what the day is all about? Tell me I'm wrong, Dave.
I don't think Americans have forgotten what the 4th of July commemorates. I mean, you'll see flags and parades, and you'll see the same kinds of activities that you have every year. And besides, they're kind of happy now that they voted for Donald Trump. They put him in office, and this year's cookout for 10 guests will cost you 30 cents less than last year, and I think they're pretty happy about that. And the American Farm Bureau Federation brings that statistic to us. I think people are pretty thankful that things like inflation are on their way down, but they also know that they can be proud of the United States. I like to find, unusual aspects of Independence Day that people might not know. In fact, did you know that if John Adams had had his way, we'd be celebrating the 4th of July on the 2nd of July? Doesn't have quite the same ring, the 2nd of July. And two founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, died on the 4th of July, same 4th of July, 1826. Early celebrations of the 4th were really rowdy affairs with mock funerals of King George III, and there was a lot of drinking, a lot of gunfire, a lot of chaotic festivities, like a Los Angeles protest rally, or riots, as what we like to call them in Tennessee.
Dave, you don't disappoint. I thank you for all that. What about the actual founders' vision of liberty, though? Are people celebrating it, or are they just celebrating burgers and dogs?
I think they're celebrating the actual freedom that the founding fathers had in mind, and that what the early settlers fought for. I don't think there's any confusion by most Americans.
I had an internship when I was a young man, and those of us, and it was at a libertarian think tank, and all the young folks would gather around, and oftentimes I just think sort of woe is me based on anything that might be in the news. There's always cause for pessimism and skepticism. But the leaders would sometimes come down and say, no, stand back and take a broad brush, that we're richer and freer, generationally than we have been. And that's the lens through which we should look at these things. Now, Graham, you've been around for a couple generations, and you've also been an immigrant to this country, so your perspective is a bit different on it. Why don't you tell us? What do you think about it?
I am sometimes saddened to think that Americans really don't appreciate what the founding fathers did, which was to make literally a life or death decision for themselves, to take on
we must all hang together, or surely we will hang separately, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And the fact that they decided to literally rebel against what was at that time the world's most powerful empire is no small thing. And I personally think that a lot of Americans don't appreciate that. And unfortunately, it rather upsets me that I believe it was, I'm pretty sure it was Benjamin Franklin who said that those who are willing to give up freedom in exchange for some temporary security deserve neither liberty nor security. And I kind of think so many Americans over the years have decided that yes, it is okay for us to trade away certain freedoms, because if we do, so the government tells us, we will be safer. And I think that's a terrible thing to do. And so, when 4th of July comes around, of course, I'm from across the pond there, so probably maybe I shouldn't be celebrating it at all. But I am more so thrilled with the idea of Independence Day than I believe probably a lot of Americans are.
I think it's a typical experience of immigrants who've come to this country to look around and think of their neighbors who've been here often since birth. You don't know what you've got. As a coda to that quote about those who give up liberty to gain temporary security will lose both. I like to add and deserve neither. And they'll actually live with neither. They won't get the security and they won't get the liberty. John Clark and I had a conversation, I think it was yesterday actually, about meat inflation. So he may have something else to say about Dave's inflation comment. But what do you say about the notion? Are we in fine fiddle? Are we in crisis? Where are we on the spectrum, John, of Americans? Which we all depend on. If our neighbors don't celebrate liberty and hold it up as an important value, we're all sunk, right?
Well, I think that is kind of what we're all kind of discussing here, which is that a nation divided against itself cannot stand. As to the beef prices, they are up significantly, but they are not as much as gasoline prices are down. And this is a holiday where people travel a great deal. And in response to Dave's comment, actually, I found a recent poll that just very recent here in 2025 that suggested that 22% of Americans said that they weren't feeling as patriotic this year. 11% said that they feel more patriotic this year. So that shows a slight imbalance, which is actually also on certain demographic planes. For Democrats, they're a little less celebratory. And young people do not enjoy this or favor this holiday as much as those over the age of 65, according to polls. But it's interesting what Graham pointed out, because, and I lived in the UK for years, and the UK is in horrible trouble right now. And as the recent concert in Glastonbury showed, a lot of young British people also have contempt for their own culture. And so Dave was spouting off some birthdays. There's another birthday today. Actually, he was 4th of July dates. He was actually with obituaries. Mine is Calvin Coolidge from here in Vermont, who was born on 4th of July. And he noticed in a speech at the 150th anniversary of this country that without the value system, the spiritual priorities that Americans have always put forward in their Constitution and other documents, and in their willingness to risk their lives for that thing we call liberty, that we would lose it. And I think that, when you ask whether people are just into celebrating their hot dogs and hamburgers and their beer versus their liberties, I think, we live in a very highly consumptive society, and soft times make soft men. And so we indeed do need to bring people together. It's scary that people are so divided. If we can't come together on 4th of July, I don't know when we will. And there's a lot of good news out there on the economy. And so despite those who don't like good news right now, jobs reports up, wages are up, inflation overall is tamed. So there's a lot to celebrate this year.
I like to say Calvin Coolidge is America's most underrated president.
No, Graham, that's Gerald R. Ford, for my money.
Now, gentlemen, let's not disagree. It's 4th of July. Common cause. They're both great men.
Ford was, for anybody who doesn't know, a veto machine. He pretty much did nothing except for veto the acts of Congress when he was a president. And boy, if there's any guidance for any other president out there, what better could they do than just simply veto every act that the Congress undertakes.
Spoken like a true libertarian.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right. Any grilling tips for the masses before we close down the segment?
That would take some understanding of how to cook, wouldn't it? Ooh.
Dave, a true military man, just gets out the bottle of Tabasco and dumps it on whatever he's got in front of him, and
Meals ready to eat.
Feels ready to eat.
and
That's what it
enjoys
is.
it. All right, well, folks, celebrate today. Enjoy those fireworks, parties, hot dogs, and cheeseburgers on the grill. But in the midst of the celebration, let's recall the reason for the day off: self-governance and a constitutional republic where individual rights reign supreme. The U.S. Supreme Court just finished their term with a flurry of cases and one unresolved issue. They weighed in on requiring age verification to access adult content online and tackled trans surgeries for children and LGBTQIA++ indoctrination in the public schools, plus more. And the biggest case of all, birthright citizenship, but really universal injunctions. Donald Trump seems happy with the outcome, though. Let's take a look at this clip.
An amazing decision, one that we're very happy about. This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done.
Well, it's great when you win, right? I mean, Donald Trump is always a fan of winning, and he celebrated the court's work because he won the big case. I'll come out of the gate and just talk about it for a second here, which is it's the birthright citizenship case that wound up having nothing to do with birthright citizenship at the Supreme Court. Instead, tackled the universal injunctions, which Donald Trump was so happy about having go by the wayside. Basically, what the Supreme Court said in a 6-3 decision was that these universal injunctions that district courts often offer to challenge any particular action that the administration does, they're going away. The Supreme Court the rule that they've articulated, it doesn't say that they are impossible to implement if they're a district court judge, but the bar or the barrier to do so is so high that it effectively stops them almost altogether. And if a judge does it, some Biden appointee who got light vetting at the Senate, perhaps, who's maybe a little more motivated politically rather than legally, they're going to get smited down by an intermediate appellate court, most likely because of this ruling. So it was funny, though. I thought, to me, the funniest thing was how Trump thanks the justices like they're politicians. Like if some politician passes, it's like, I want to thank Senator Cruz from Texas for help. It's like, I want to thank Justice Barrett because she wrote the opinion. Well, yeah, it's just so funny how he breaks down that wall. And of course, other presidents might have thought that, but they never said it. They would have just said that they thank the work of the court for attending to these issues and, working for the American people, kind of a thing. So anyway, that was the big case. These universal injunctions have stymied the president and his administration and others as well. So it's no struggle to see why Trump is delighted about it. But what about for liberty? I struggle with it. Graham, I want to ask you, we have a system now where judges can be the protectors of Americans against unconstitutional actions by the government, by the executive, which we know they do all the time, whether it's a Trump administration or a Biden administration. They regularly violate the rights of the people. Is this an important protection that's been lost, or how do you view it?
That's, Scott, I wrestle with this all the time, because we're talking 1803 here, Marbury v. Madison, when, the kind of, for want of a better way of putting it, the idea of judicial review was essentially kind of then codified, if you like, if that's the right word to use. But
I like invented. I like invented, but you pick your own.
This idea that judges can strike down laws that violate the Constitution is a wonderful concept. But then what happens, and also you'd think, you want our elected leaders to be the ones who, write the laws and implement policy without interference from unelected judges. But at the same time, if there's no barrier against the lawmakers, whether you're talking about the executive branch or the legislative branch, if there's nothing stopping them, nothing reining them in, then they pass laws that do violate the Constitution. Quite often, I'd argue that an awful lot of the laws that we have on the books now, federal, state, and local level, violate the Constitution. Most of them, in fact.
Yeah, most is right. That's my perspective too.
So where is it? I'm not enough of a legal scholar. Well, I'm not a legal scholar at all, but I'm not enough of a legal scholar to say which is the better way to go. I like the idea, like you, Scott. I like the idea of executive power being reined in. I like the idea of the power of Congress being reined in, actually, as well. But it's a double-edged sword. You've got people on the lawmaking side, but you also now have people on the judicial side because they were appointed. They were essentially political appointees. And unfortunately, too many of them now remain wedded to their politics and put that above the Constitution and above the law. And so, which way do you go? Either way you go, somebody is violating the Constitution somewhere along the line.
John Clark, you're a constitutional lawyer and a liberty lover. What's on your mind when you read this decision?
Well, that decision in particular was, I really wasn't expecting it in that context. I wasn't sure how the birthright citizenship decision would go, and they punted on that one. I think it was the right decision because I think the answer...
Let me just correct you, just for people's understanding. They didn't punt on that decision. They never agreed to take it in the first place. That decision has not yet reached the Supreme Court. And I'm taking the time to correct because I know that you know what I'm saying because you're an attorney, but so many others don't. When the district court got the case of challenging Trump's actions, they immediately put a stop to it and said, you can't go through with this while we're deciding whether or not it's legal for you to take these actions you've contemplated. And then that decision went to the Supreme Court, and they're now able to take those actions unless and until the district court rules otherwise about the main issue that birthright citizenship either must be protected because of the Constitution or not. But the injunction business is just separate. I just want to set the table on that, and thank you.
And thank you for the correction. So you're saying it really wasn't ripe or even before the court. It'll come up another time, presumably. But this issue is perhaps even more monumental. I think that what Graham's hinting at, though, is that there is a balance. We certainly do not want a runaway executive. The whole point of the judicial branch is to hold not just the executive, but the legislative branch accountable without themselves replacing interpretations of the law with their own. And when you can look at the least common denominator judge in the country and judge shop, so to speak, to find one judge who can shut down the entire executive branch, you have totally turned the entire constitutional structure on its head, and that is now ended. You referenced President Trump's overt acknowledgement of thanks to certain court justices. That's maybe just being transparent because I don't think the Supreme Court has ever, at least in my lifetime, been this overtly partisan. And we see that with the Three Stooges. The consistent dissents that
panelists' words are their own and do not necessarily reflect that of the editorial staff or management of LibertyNation.com. Go ahead, the Three Stooges.
Well, it just popped into my head. It was a Freudian slip, I guess. I didn't say who, but it
was a 6-3 decision, by the way, for those listening and watching. And three in the minority were Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan, and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
And those were the stooges I was referring to, which is my own opinion as a libertarian. But it's really obvious. I mean, it's really overt. You can almost predict how this court will rule on certain hot-button issues. And so, but I think once again, the balance between the judiciary and the executive and legislative branches is potentially is the course that our Supreme Court and our country continues to need to steer carefully. And that very striation of partisanship on the court is disturbing.
We've got time to discuss one of the other issues that the court went through. And I know, John, you did write about it for the pages of LibertyNation.com, which was their ruling on basically parental choice in LGBTQIA++ indoctrination. A very liberal school district right down the road where I'm sure lots of bureaucrats and lobbyists send their kids to in Montgomery County, Maryland, had one of these. There was a book a while back called Heather Had Two Mommies, I think it was. It was like the main talking point in this space, but I guess that's old school now. The new book was about a woman, a girl who had getting two uncles instead of two mommies. And, these devoutly religious people didn't want their kids propagandized to that it was such a beautiful thing that same-sex marriage would occur in a family, which is the sole purpose of the reading. And the court said the parents had a constitutional right for their own religious practice to be notified of it and get an opt-out. What do you think, John Clark?
Well, I think it was the right decision and for the right reasons. We have a lot of that here in Vermont. In fact, we have some books like the book Gender Queer, which are overtly they are graphic novels with depicting acts of sex as well. So where is that line, that balance again? And the left has said, well, this will mean, women can't even express that they're feminist and all these histrionics, but hopefully the schools will just find that balance. And in the article I wrote for Liberty Nation about it, I compared it to abortion. You could teach children at some appropriate age, because one of the issues here you could see clearly influence the core is these are very young children. These are kindergartners, and you can't teach them about tolerance towards gay people without also teaching them what gay means and what copulation is. And these are things that traditionally, whether religious or not, a lot of parents don't want their children to be brought into that level of enlightenment that early. But if the school at some age-appropriate time were to teach about these subjects, I made the comparison to abortion. It's one thing to teach what abortion is. It's another to teach that it's absolutely evil or a wonderful good. And that's what the court emphasized about these materials, and the dissent tried to dismiss, is that they weren't just sharing with children about these issues of homosexuality and transgenderism. They were sharing a very strong moral perspective, and even the court indicated they were sort of penalizing children who dared say anything otherwise as hurting the feelings of the recipients. So here in Vermont, particularly, this has gone way too far. So the emphasis of the court, by the way, wasn't to ban the materials either. It is to give parents
No,
right.
this has nothing to do. This is about a parent's right, and we appreciate that. Possible exception of your use of the word enlightening to describe what happens when a child is exposed to.
I was being facetious, I think, and I hope
I know that. There's an interesting side issue here, and I wonder if you've thought about it at all, and I'll take your very brief response if you have. There's a potential here that Satanists, literal Satanists who have established religions, the Church of Satan or whatever they call it, but they actually have the same legal rights that a Christian church might have, or a synagogue or a mosque, that they may be able to say to school districts, hey, we didn't get a chance to opt out of your instruction that venerated, for instance, traditional marriage or some other thing that could be called a Judeo-Christian. Is that going to be a thing we see in the courts with black nail polish and challenge?
Well, I think we already have. There have been some similar challenges, though. It depends on where one is in the public school system in America, because most public schools aren't pushing traditional marriage. But that is the gray area of the decision. It will be up, and the dissent made this point very strongly, Sotomayor's dissent, that it's going to leave schools to try to figure out how to still incorporate materials that are broad and monitor the opt-out provision if you have a myriad of potential faiths. But as the majority pointed out, too, this is a problem of their own making. They refused to listen to hundreds of parents in Maryland who were protesting. And ultimately, did the schools serve the parents, and do the parents have the right to oversee their children's moral upbringing, including Satanists? Or is the public sphere going to replace that and step into the area of morality, which it really has in the last 30 years. It's become much more of an ideological focal point, and it's contributing to the deterioration of public schools and why more and more people are opting for homeschooling, as I've also written about. So I do think it'll be up to the schools, state by state, perhaps, to navigate those boundaries of what's reasonable and what parents should be allowed to opt out of.
Dave, I know you were chomping at the bit there to add your 2 cents, but sadly we're just out of time for this segment, so we'll have to get your court commentary at another time. Thank you for your comments. The court is on a summer break now, and the media coverage is about to die down, and we'll be gearing up for more coverage of the court as things get closer to them starting their session again in October. Thanks for watching. New York City has a ranked choice system of electing officials that allows voters to list up to 5 candidates in order of preference. If no one candidate surpasses 50% of the votes, the last place candidate is eliminated, and those votes go to the next choice on each ballot. The process then continues until 2 candidates remain, kind of like dodgeball. Well, this time around, New Yorkers chose Zohran Mamdani, and for what reasons, we're still trying to figure out. Let's see what Press Secretary Levitt had to say.
Yeah, look, the president is always willing to work with everyone. He's working with Democrats across the country, Democrat governors, and he said he'll work with people on the far left. He works with Republicans. He works with people in the middle. He wants to do what's right for America, but surely someone who holds these values and is quite literally a communist and condemns every value that makes this country great. Common sense, law and order, low taxes, working hard, and earning your keep in this country. He's against all of that, and I think the president would find it difficult to work with someone like that if he is elected.
Dave, can you clear something up for me? I thought that the Cuomo family had some kind of birthright, lock into these these elected positions in New York. How did they let this one squeak by? What happened to Andrew Cuomo or his brother? No, none of them are fit to be mayor of New York City.
Well, I think Andrew Cuomo is, licking his wounds. I mean, by current Bernie Sanders and AOC standards, Cuomo is a Democrat old think. And the pendulum is moving toward new think. Cuomo thought that his name recognition would be the e-ticket to success, but it's the old story. The good news is Cuomo has name recognition. The bad news is Cuomo has name recognition. His COVID catastrophe and his sexual dalliances were anvils hung around his neck, and he just couldn't shake them. Cuomo was up against one of the most formidable political strategies, and I think this is fair to say. You have a neophyte candidate who offers free stuff. Now, combine Milton Friedman's famous quip, "There is no such thing as a free lunch," with "Don't pay any attention to the man behind the screen, little girl," and you get Mamdani. All you get if you offer me something for free is I'll take it. What the people of New York will learn soon, though, and they'll learn it soon enough if they elect Mayor Mamdani mayor, is that when you are ringing up a tab, the bill comes due eventually. And when the bill comes due, the poor and the low-income citizens and the working class will look around for someone to pick up the check. But surprise, surprise, they've all moved to Florida, Texas, or Tennessee.
According to Mamdani, that's just not going to be the case. They're actually generating more competition by leveling up their tax bases to equal those of neighboring states. Graham, Uber driver jokes aside, or bodega owners, who is Zohran Mamdani? A name that, was anybody? No, basically nobody was talking about this guy a couple months ago, and now he may be the mayor of America's first city, which is no small thing, which has a budget. It's like being a governor of a large state, basically, right? In terms of what goes on there. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say is we should all remember that there was a time not all that long ago, relatively speaking, when nobody had heard of Barack Obama. So I just wanted to let that chill run down everyone's spine for a minute. But
President Mamdani on the horizon is let's hope.
God. So anyway, Mamdani, yes, he was actually born in Uganda. I believe his parents were Ugandan, and well, his mother was Indian, I believe, and I believe his father was kind of half and half Uganda. There's an awful lot of Indian, and when I say Indian, I mean, of course, East Indian.
He makes great fodder for the Benetton ad, is what you're telling us.
There's a lot of, and there's always been a lot of Indian influence in Uganda. In fact, Idi Amin used to hate them, and he was trying to kill them all off. But the Indians have been in Uganda heavily for a long time, so that's just a completely irrelevant fact. But anyway, so Mamdani moved to the United States when he was 7 years old. He became a U.S. citizen in 2018 there. So just like about 7 years ago, became a U.S. citizen. And since 2021, he's been a member of the New York Assembly. And he is, there's no question about it. It's funny that the newspapers, certain news outlets, and including PolitiFact, which of course is always a fair and balanced site that you can always rely on to tell you the truth. Even they have been trying to absolutely deny that this man is a socialist. Whether or not you call him a communist it's almost kind of irrelevant. The two terms socialism and communism to many people are practically interchangeable. But the man definitely is a socialist, and for these newspapers to trip over themselves to pretend he's not. I mean, he's actually on record, on video, as talking about how his idea of government is the ultimate goal is to seize the means of production. He used those exact words: seize the means of production. That's the very phrase that communists have been using forever. And so that's who the guy is.
Since Marx wrote them, I think it has been their mantra.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. You know, and so anyway, that's him. He's 33 years old right now, and I, in a way, kind of perversely hope in my mind that New Yorkers actually do elect him as their next mayor, because then they will get to live this horror for themselves, and maybe that'll open their eyes to better ways of living.
Well, those of us who are old enough to remember Mayor Dinkins' reign in New York City, we know that that city can handle a horribly inept mayor. I don't know if they can handle one that's horribly inept and actively socialist or communist, though. There's kind of a wave, it seems like, going around with this. I don't know if it's a move to socialism or not. John Clark, the Democrat Party nationally is headed towards more division, or are they rebounding with this progressive socialism? Is sort of a path forward for them, or is this more of localized just to New York City?
Well, I think that's the $64,000 question, because it is sort of the petri dish for the ideological civil war that's being waged here in America between a traditionalist, we might call it, vision of equality for all, constitutional principles, free markets, regulated to some degree, perhaps to prevent monopolies and other abuses, versus a social justice ideological utopia in which kind of like it is Marxism. It's called cultural Marxism. And now, instead of just the two classes of the wealthy versus the poor, we have the dispute between races, the dispute between gender orientation. We have the dispute between open borders, etc. And so what they're being told is, as Dave mentioned, that you can have everything. You can have your cake and eat it too. We can print infinite amounts of money. We can give you free rides on the bus. We can give you universal income, and that this will actually lift all the boats for everyone and get rid of those horrible billionaires. And, on the other side, you have the cynicism of Graham, which suggests, sadly, that maybe they need to learn the consequences of this errant ideology and how devastating it will be to the people who are the workers. It seems to me that he's not out to seize the means of production, but to destroy it. And he's actually become overtly racist and talking about taxing white neighborhoods at higher rates than non-white. I mean, everything he represents is an extremism which the Democrats have to sort out back to your side of the equation. For a long time, there's been a rift on the right there's a rift on the left, and it's between the far left and the blue dog Democrats that maybe Cuomo and others more represented. I don't actually hope that New York City goes that way, because I just think it would destroy a lot of lives. And I'm hoping they come to their senses.
I saw Mr. Mamdani, by the way, give a response to that issue about him saying that the tax increases will fall on white neighborhoods, and I'm paraphrasing him, but basically his reaction was that the tax base that it wasn't motivated by race, but it would just be sort of like a happy accident that white people got the lion's share of the increase.
Well, it's still Marxism, and it's still going to quell growth, and a lot of people will be fleeing that city. A lot of businesses already are. A lot of the finance sector, especially with the modern internet, is relocating and not seeing the benefits of being located there anymore. And of course, AOC chased Amazon out, and tens of thousands of jobs and the revenue there. So I fear what New York City will look like if this guy becomes their leader and implements all of these economy-destroying policies. The utopia doesn't exist. No society has achieved this dream, but many people are beguiled by the promises on the election campaign trail, as Dave points out.
I thought his most, I don't know, wild-eyed or crazy, or I don't know what the right thing to apply to it was, this statement about how he's going to have supermarkets, city-owned supermarkets, that are going to handle food distribution in the city. I got the opportunity to meet the founder of Whole Foods, John Mackey, a couple of weeks ago, and then read his book after I met him. And just the struggles he talks about of like getting produce right, for instance. The Whole Foods company for a long time only had dry goods, and then they added produce later on when they started growing. And I think they had like a false start where they started a produce section and then stopped it, because it is not easy to keep goods fresh, available, and also not throw a lot of them away, which of course is money down the tubes. Dave, I know that you said you liked MREs, but I assume that you don't want to eat them day to day. What's food production going to be like in New York City when all the supermarkets are Mamdani markets?
Well, it's not going to be very good, actually. I mean, what's going to end up happening is that the government-owned supermarkets will have nothing on their shelves, very much like the Soviet Union's supermarkets, and the other supermarkets will be well attended by only those who can afford them. So the poor will have nothing. The people who can afford supermarkets will have everything, and therein lies the problem.
You know, of all the things to give control to socialists of, to sit around and think, food distribution, that's something they could really do a good job with. It requires a certain kind of resistance to history that it does kind of shock the conscience.
Well, you know how bad this idea is is already starting to look at what a nightmare this is going to become. And that's because just recently, I think within the last few days, Mamdani has actually been bragging about the fact that his idea for his idea is there's going to be 5 of them. There's going to be 5, government run grocery stores.
One per borough, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah, I guess so. But you know what? They're not. It's not going to cost anything. It's not going to cost the taxpayer any extra, because he's going to pay for them by dipping into this pot of money, $140 million fund that New York, because New York normally, to his understanding, New York subsidizes corporate-owned grocery stores every year to the tune of $140 million. He's going to use some of that money to build his 5 grocery stores. The only problem with that is he actually read a government infographic incorrectly, and that pot of $140 million that he was going to use to fund his grocery stores doesn't exist, because New York City does not subsidize corporate-owned grocery stores to that. So his big grand plan for paying for this has already turned out to be a complete myth. That there is no money to pay for this.
No hate and free stuff for everyone. It's an interesting campaign. We'll see how he does in the general election this fall. Thanks, panel. We are back to Twist the Brain, having a little fun with our panel of overly excitable people. Dave is running the board, and he runs a tight ship, so brace yourselves.
Thank you, Scott, and it's time for America's penultimate game show, where each of our contestants does their very best, where the rigor is modest, experience seldom matters, and the intellectual bar is low. So let's get right to it. Remember, expert panelists, and you too, John, to answer the question, you must answer with the letter identifier and the answer. The shout out with the right answer I hear first will be the winner. So let's get right to it. Question number 1. What was the name of the U.S. air base Iran attacked? Was it A, Balat Air Base, B, Al-Ubad Air Base, C, Al-Udeid Air Base, or D, Doha Air Base?
C, Al-Udeid.
Graham gets it, and a 1 goes down in the credit corner for Graham. Good work. After 1, you're on a trend. Question number 2. In what state was funding for dental services for the poor cut? Was it A, New York, B, Florida, C, California, D, Rhode Island?
Wow.
That's a first. That's a first. Somebody gets.
Stop.
Hey,
C, California.
Scott gets it. It is right. C, California.
did you know it, or you guessed it?
I knew enough to guess correctly.
I didn't think California ever
Number
got any.
3.
And a multiple choice. This is a note to our younger standardized test taking audience, John Clark. A lot of the right test taking skills just involve knowing enough to arrive at the right answer rather than knowing necessarily that answer.
I agree. And Dave usually makes it easy by giving us some throwaways.
Yeah.
He made
but
that
it
one.
wasn't there. Okay,
No.
question
Yes,
number
To
3.
success, the secret to success with multiple choice is to use a process of elimination to get to the right answer.
Yes.
Question number 3. Carrie Lake is the senior advisor to which federal agency? A, U.S. Waterways Regulatory Agency, B, the Media Directors Board, C, U.S. Global Media, or D, Federal Communications Commission?
D. FCC.
Federal Communications Commission. You have to repeat the answer too.
D. Federal Communications
I didn't say
Commission.
D. So
Wrong. It's C, U.S. Global Media. No one got that. Okay, number 4. What was the name of the operation in which the U.S. attacked and obliterated 3 Iranian nuclear sites? Was it A, Arm & Hammer, B, Midnight Special, C, Big Bombs East of Baghdad, or D, Midnight Hammer?
D.
Midnight Hammer.
Midnight Hammer.
Scott got it. He shouted out. So Scott is on the board with 2. We have Graham with 1, and John not so much. So, question number...
And how dare you suggest that those nuclear facilities were obliterated? Because according to CNN, they were barely scratched.
I'm telling you that when 360,000 pounds of TNT go off in one of your mountains, it's not trivial. Question number 5. President Trump named the war between Israel and Iran the A, 7-Day War, B, War of the Roses, C, 12-Day War, or D, Really Huge and Beautiful War?
D. Really Huge and Beautiful War.
D, 12-Day War.
That was C, right?
You would have thought it would be D, wouldn't you? You would have thought it would have been D, but it's C, 12-Day War, yes.
So Graham has 1 on the board now. Actually, 2 on the board.
2.
I found it interesting that certain left-leaning media outlets actually started using that to describe that war. They started
Really?
talking about it as the 12-Day War.
Yeah. Question number 6. During the debate on the Big Beautiful Bill, the Senate parliamentarian declared some portions of the bill inadmissible because of what? A, the cardinal rule, B, the golden rule, C, the Robert Byrd rule, or D, the rule of law?
C, the Robert Byrd rule.
C, the Robert Byrd rule. Did you say C, John Clark?
I did.
Oh, okay.
So, question number 7. During the U.S. attack on the uranium nuclear facilities, 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flew round trip from what U.S. Air Force base? A, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. B, Little Rock Air Force Base, Arkansas. Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri. Or D, First Base at Ebbets Field, Brooklyn, New York.
C, Whiteman.
A, Oklahoma.
Scott's right. Let's see.
All right. I'm here to make you guys look good.
Okay, C.
What? Is that right? I was waiting for Dave to weigh in.
Yes, C.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna
Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri is the correct answer. Okay, question number 8. The latest NATO summit meeting was held in A, Brussels, Belgium, B, Bruges, Belgium, C, The Hague in the Netherlands, D, Dutch Queen Maxima's backyard.
A,
Brussels.
Brussels. Couldn't get my words out.
No, C, The Hague.
I was gonna guess The Hague when Graham got it wrong. You didn't give me.
Well, I wasn't sure, and the only reason why I
But
guessed
you didn't know that Graham got it wrong until I told him
It's
Graham
true.
got it
We
wrong.
didn't know. Yes.
NATO is based in Brussels, I believe, so that's why I
It is.
guessed
Yeah.
that, but I
So,
wasn't sure.
question number 9.
While it still hangs on for dear life.
Yeah.
So what we've seen so far is that our panel has lived up to its reputation. Question number 9. Name the case involving a preliminary injunction that blocked President Trump's January 20th executive order on birthright citizenship. If you've been paying attention, you'll get this one. A, Mikasa versus Sukasa. B, Trump v. Casa. C, Bondi versus the ACLU. Or D, Frazier versus Ali.
B, Trump v. Casa.
B, Trump v. Casa is right. John gets 1.
Give me 1 at least. Yeah.
You actually
That's one on the board.
You actually have 2, John.
Oh.
Squandered. Question number 10, the last and decisive question. Federal law enforcement is trying to determine possible threats from 1,000 illegal aliens from which? A, Seattle. B, Sudan. C, Iran. D, Los Angeles.
C, Iran.
Okay. John, I think you slipped that in.
I still lost.
No, actually,
So ignominiously.
it is a tie. It is a up and straightforward tie between Scott and John.
Sudden death. Let's do it.
Sudden death. Now I have to think of a question to break this tie. Okay. In the 1930s movie, The Wolfman, Maria Ouspenskaya says these famous words. Even a man who's good and says his prayers at night can become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the harvest moon is bright. Who was she saying that about? Her son? The man who just killed her son? Or her daughter's latest child?
Her son, I guess.
John,
Yeah.
you broke the
Hey.
code. And John is the winner with 4. Awesome job, folks. Awesome job. And I'll turn it back over to you, Scott. Take it away.
And the wolfbane blooms.
And the harvest moon is bright.
All right, well, thank you for playing again. Hope we left you all with smiles and dinner party facts and anecdotes. Thanks for joining us. That's it for our Conservative 5/4 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. Liberty Nation News also has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Scott Cosenza, in for Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for the latest news and commentary. Your choice for free thinking, free speech. LibertyNation.com.